As Lynn drove off to visit her parents, I waved with a smile. I was going to enjoy the next week. Sure, I'd miss her, but it was going to be great hanging with the guys too. 7 days wasn't a long time, but it was long enough. As much as my friends make fun of me, I'm truly in love with her. We'd never been apart for longer than a weekend before, but even then, we'd check in with each other a few times a day. Unfortunately, this time around, her and her parents were vacationing in a cabin out in the woods. So the cell phone reception would be spotty if it even existed at all. Living out in the deep country, cell phone service issues were something we had grown used to, but this was even more remote than we were living. I likely wouldn't even hear anything from her until they were leaving, which made more than a little nervous, which made me more than a little nervous. Hopefully, everything would go well and the time would fly by quickly. Later that evening, I went out with my buddies, Greg and Nick. We had planned to hit up a local club where one of our favorite local bands were playing. Thankfully, Nick had volunteered to be the designated driver, so Greg and I got completely shit faced. The music was amazing, as it always was, and we enjoyed the 90s grunge theme of the club. It really took us back to the old days. I even bought the band a round of drinks and talked to them for a little while. All in all, it was a damn near perfect night. Nick dropped me off at home and I wandered up to the front door. I took my keys from my pocket and slipped them into the lock, but found the door was already unlocked. That was odd. I could have sworn I'd locked it on my way out. I went into security mode and quickly stumbled into the house, grabbing a huge umbrella from the nearby stand as I went. I staggered into the living room with it held over my head and came to an abrupt halt, seeing Lynn sitting there reading a book. I pulled a smooth move and put the umbrella away before she looked up with a loving smile. Have a good night, babe? I rose a brow and moved to sit next to her on the couch as I spoke. Yeah, it was awesome. Shrug was playing tonight. What are you doing home, baby? I thought you were on the road to a cabin earlier. She smiled and shrugged while replying. About a half hour or so after I left, I got a call from Mom saying that Dad wasn't doing too well, and we had to postpone until next weekend. It kind of sucks, but since I don't work weekends, I guess it's not really that big of a deal. I was a little concerned hearing that. What's wrong with your dad? Is everything okay? She nodded and put a hand on my leg. Yeah, just his blood pressure again. It sounds like you know how stressed out he is all the time. I nodded. Her father had seemed more stressed out than usual lately. I adored her father, truly. He'd given me a lot of amazing advice over the years and had welcomed me into their family almost immediately. He had become more of a father to me than my own father had ever been. Somewhere I even still had a Era Heap album he'd given me in high school. Just one of those completely random memories. I was glad the man was going to be all right. The room was still spinning a bit from all the alcohol. I'd looked longingly at the kitchen for a minute. I hadn't realized how hungry I was up until that moment. I looked back to Lynn with a huge smile on my face. Babe, how much do you love me? She set her book down and rose an inquisitive brow at that, certain I was playing her up for something or another. More than anything, an exact answer depends on what exactly it is that you want. I chuckled at the drunkenly before responding sweetly. I would give you my kingdom for a bacon burger right now. Lynn smirked at my comment. And what kingdom would that be, Aaron? My smile faded a bit as it took all the concentration that my drunken mind possessed to think of the name of my kingdom. I grinned again when I thought of an idea and told her about it. The kingdom of nerves are never sober, where the men drink all day and the ladies make bacon burgers. It's a magical world, really full of great liquor and greasy foods. No one gets a hangover there either, which is why it's magic. She seemed impressed that I was able to string all that together and took some time to blatantly laugh at me before responding. Sounds like you live in a very sexist kingdom, sweetheart. What if I want to drink all day and have someone make me burgers? I was quick to respond. Yes, I thought you might say that. As the king of Never Sober, I hereby make you my queen. She shall drink or make burgers on alternating days, except for Sundays, when we shall drink beer together and eat pizza. 'Cause let's be honest, sometimes you just need a break from burgers. That, of course, uh, elicited another grin and laugh from Lynn. She ran her fingers through my hair for a moment before slipping off the couch. Only because I love you, my king, shall I make you the burger that thou hast so humbly requested. I was a little surprised. While she did cook for me generally, she'd usually suggest that we get some fast food or something. So she didn't have to cook so late. I assumed she was just in a great mood and decided not to question it. Least my bacon burger be forsaken. I laid down on the couch and closed my eyes to rest for a second. The next thing I knew, she was shaking me awake gently and laying my plated burger on the coffee table in front of me. Just as I shook off the sleep and woke myself up, she was coming back with a nice tall glass of milk, and she knew me so well. I kissed her on the cheek and tucked it into my food. I finished in record time and chugged the last half of my glass of milk to wash it all down. I looked over at her when I was done. Thanks, baby. I'm lucky to have you. She smirked at that before replying, Damn right you are. I laughed and stood up with a stretch. I took his plate to the kitchen sink and pre-washed the ketchup from it for easy cleanup later. I wandered back into the living room with a yawn before looking at her again. I'm tired, baby. I think I'm going to head to bed. Coming with me? She smiled at me over her book as she responded, I'm going to stay down here and do some cleaning before between chapters. I'll be up in a little while. I bowed my head to her reverently while speaking. I shall see thee on the morrow, my queen. I left the room, followed by a new round of laughter echoing down the hall from Lynn. I somehow managed to climb the steps and ditch most of my clothes on the way to bed, where I quickly passed out. I woke up in the middle of the night to strange sounds coming from downstairs. A quick glance to the other side of the bed told me that Lynn hadn't made it to bed. I blinked my eyes a few times, forced myself to stand, and walked out of our bedroom and down the stairs. I walked as quietly as I could out of habit for the time of night. When I got to the bottom step, I looked both ways and ended up slowly following the sound to the bathroom. Noticing the door was cracked a little, I knocked on it before entering. Is everything okay, babe? I looked around the bathroom lazily before noticing the blood in the sink. I jolted completely awake and ran into her side at the sink. I thought I'd noticed a tooth, but before I had the time to take a decent look, she was already running hot water and washing whatever had been there down the drain. I stared at her reflection in the mirror. Oh my God, baby, what happened? She seemed pale, but otherwise okay as she responded, I'm fine, honey. It's just a nosebleed. I was concerned. I couldn't remember the last time she had had one. Do you have a headache or anything? She washed her face before responding tiredly. No, just the nosebleed. It happens sometimes when the weather changes like this. Gotta love living in Ohio. I eased a bit when I saw her give me a slight smile. I wrapped his arms around her and kissed the top of her head lovingly before talking again. Let's go back to bed and I'll rub your shoulders. If you're still feeling bad tomorrow, we'll just call a bed and Netflix day. She smiled and nodded a bit, allowing me to lead her back upstairs to the bed. As promised, I rubbed her shoulders until she fell asleep, then passed out again soon afterwards myself. I woke up the next morning and once again found her side of the bed empty. I yawned with a stretch and slipped out of bed and headed for the bathroom. I was nursing one hell of a hangover, and the best way to start the day in this scenario was with a nice hot shower. As I got in and turned on balance the temperature via the hot and cold faucets, I noticed something in the drain. There seemed to be a rather large amount of hair in there that hadn't been there the day before. It was a little odd, but not completely out of the ordinary. So I stood up and enjoyed the water flowing over my skin. I wasted about 30 minutes in there before getting out to towel off. I pulled on some flannel pajama pants and the first t-shirt I pulled out of my drawer. Before heading downstairs, about halfway down, I caught the smell of pancakes and what seemed to be bacon. Bacon twice in a row. This was like some previously unexplored version of heaven. I rushed down the rest of the steps, down the hallway, and into the kitchen. I slipped up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist. She started startled a bit before turning around with a huge grin and a curtsy. Your greasy breakfast is nearly ready, my liege. I got a huge kick out of that and laid a gentle kiss on her sweet lips before speaking. I can't remember the last time you got up early to cook me breakfast, babe. Are you sure you're feeling okay? I was only half joking. I was still kind of worried about her from the night before. She turned back around to flip the pancakes as she responded, I'll be fine, just couldn't sleep well last night. Thought I'd surprise you with a nice breakfast. Coffee is ready if you want some. I put the bottle of ibuprofen next to the pot in the counter just in case. I sighed contently and headed for the coffee and ibuprofen as I spoke. What would I do without you, babe? She chuckled and flipped the pancakes again as she replied. I ask myself the same question every day. I smirked, poured his coffee, took a couple of ibuprofens, and went to the kitchen table to relax. Halfway through my first cup, she served me a ham and cheese omelet, some buttermilk pancakes, and of course the glorious bacon. I put a hand on her arm before she went to get her own plate. I gotta pause for a minute to plug up my computer.
It's all good.
Okay. I really appreciate this, babe. Love you. She gave me a wink before settling a quick kiss and hurrying off to get her own plate. We sat there for a while, eating and drinking coffee and making general conversation. Even though she insisted that she was feeling okay, I still couldn't help but worry about her. I convinced her to have the bed and Netflix day after all. We spent most of the day and the evening binge watching episodes of American Horror Story, one of their favorite shows. We even took turns getting snacks from the kitchen and making conversations about plot points. It was going on 3 in the morning by the time we realized it. After the last episode of the season we were on was over, Lynn kissed my cheek and slipped out of bed. I'm going to go take a bath and read for a bit. I nodded and spoke as she wandered off. If I haven't heard from you in an hour or so, I'll come check on you. I flipped through the newly added section of Netflix to find something that would catch my interest. Like always, I ended up scanning every single row of films listed, which ate up about 30 minutes of my time. In the end, I settled on watching an episode of 30 Rock. When that was over, I headed downstairs to check on Lynn. I found her in the tub reading her Kindle. The water looked a little red, but I assumed she'd used some bath salts or something, which she was known to do now and then. I sat on the closed toilet next to the tub and smiled over at her. You doing okay in here? It's been about an hour now. She lowered the Kindle to look over at me and nodded. Yeah, I just got caught up in this book. I'll be out in a bit. I kissed her forehead and headed back up the stairs to get back into bed. I watched a couple more episodes. By the time that 2 hour mark had passed, I decided to wander back down and check on her again. She never stayed in the tub for this long. She must be going for a new personal best, I joked with myself. By the time I got there, I found the bathtub empty. I glanced at the tub and noticed that there was dark red ring of film in it. There was a strange smell in the room. I couldn't put my finger on it. I left the bathroom and went in search of her. It didn't take long. She was wrapped in a towel on the couch reading. Babe, are you sure everything is okay? I just found the weirdest shit in the tub. She looked up curiously. Look, I've told you 100 times today, honey. I'm fine. Sorry I accidentally used too much bubble bath stuff. I'll rinse it out better before I come to bed so it doesn't stain. That explained the red ring, but not the smell. I decided to let it go for now. I carefully unwrapped the towel from her body, ditched my clothes, and we made love right there on the couch. We'd been lurking some spontaneity lately, and it was nice to just go with the flow of things, so to speak. Things seemed a little different, though. It turned out to be the best sex I'd ever had in my entire life. I couldn't quite explain it. Was almost like making love to another person. She'd done things she'd never done before that drove me absolutely wild. I carried her to bed where we passed out curled up with one another. Despite work, all week went like that. There was breakfast every morning, dinner every night, and amazing sex sometimes more than once a day. And of course, her random disappearances at odd times for baths and the like. There were also strange things happening more often. I found the red ring in the bath a few more times, an increasing amount of hair in the drain, and I would swear I saw a tooth in the sink the other day. I was met with increasing levels of annoyance. However, whenever I asked her how she was feeling, the strangest thing of all happened. On Thursday morning, on my way to work, that morning, I'd gotten a voicemail from her boss wondering if she was all right. When I asked Lynn about it, she told me that she had taken the week off work and maybe the manager had forgotten about it. Lynn said she'd give her a call and take care of it. I just couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't seem like herself, yet at the same time was more than enjoying this new her. That night, while we were making love, something odd happened. We were in mid kiss when one of her teeth came out, and it somehow made its way into my mouth. I gripped her face on either side carefully and was trying to break the kiss in a panic when the skin on her face seemed to tear. She jumped up and ran to the bathroom, with me hot on her tail. She slammed the door in my face and locked it, refusing to let me in. That's when I heard my cell phone ring upstairs. No one ever called this late, so I assumed it was an emergency. I dashed upstairs to grab my phone and was in the process of answering it again as I was about halfway back down the stairs. It was Lynn's mother. Aaron? Hello? Yeah, I'm here. Is there something wrong with Jeannie? No, it's Lynn. There's been an accident. At that, I jerked my phone away from my ear and looked between it and the bathroom before responding. Had she called her mother? What's going on with Lynn? I've been worried for days. We just made it to the hospital. Something attacked her out in the woods this morning. The doctors think it was a wolf or something, but we're still not entirely sure yet. How quickly can you make it here? The whole world came to a standstill. How was any of this possible? Lynn was just on the other side of that door. They just made love, for fuck's sake. None of this made any sense to me. With the phone in my ear, I slammed my foot hard enough into the bathroom door to pop the lock. As it flew open, I saw her, or at least what was left of her. Something stood there, devoid of skin, staring at me with her eyes, its mouth open into a snare, revealing a glistening hole full of broken teeth and bleeding gums. A twisted claw hand swiped out at me, ripping into the flesh of my chest. I screamed and dropped the phone as the creature tried to pull me in the bathroom. I pulled all my weight behind a boot to its left knee. It roared as it stumbled, buying me just enough time to get the fuck out of there. I could hear Lynn's mom screaming over the phone as I ran past, but there was no time to pick it up. I tore down the hallway and through the living room to the front door with that thing in hot pursuit. It was close enough that I could smell its rancid breath as it breathed on my neck. I made it to the front door, but it was locked. I ducked just as it clawed at me. Instead of wedging those jagged claws right into the wood of the front door, it wailed as it wiggled around, attempting to dislodge itself. I grabbed a nearby lamp and smashed it over the thing's oozing head, but it didn't seem to faze it much. I took off once again, this time for the back door. I made it there quickly enough and even managed to unlock it and slip out into the night as I heard the creature's screams as it thundered along behind me. Our closest neighbor was just through the woods behind the house, barely a quarter of a mile away. I'd made the journey a few times in the last year or so, and it was a short one. Right now, however, it might as well be across the country. I ducked through the bushes and under the branches all the while. I heard it crashing along, slipping now and again from the gore that clung to its feet. I could hear more sheets of quickly decaying flesh slide off it as I ran. It squished and oozed its way faster, starting to close the distance between us once again. I had no idea how close I was to the neighbor's house and wasn't sure how much longer I had before the thing overtook me. Suddenly, I made it out of the woods, that old brown and white cottage coming into view. I no sooner left the tree line when that thing grabbed me. Dark fluid soaked through the shoulder of my t-shirt as it jerked me backwards and onto my ass. It looked down at me, thick yellow viscous fluid gushing into at its mouth as its jaw unhinged to open its mouth wider than automatically possible. Just as it pulled back its claws for what surely would have been its final swipe, its bulbous head exploded into bloody, rotten chunks everywhere, and it fell atop me. I kicked it off and scooted backwards as fast as I could, not stopping till I ran into something. I looked back to see what had halted my progress and saw my neighbor standing there with a smoking double-barreled shotgun. He looked me over and turned to walk away, monitoring monitoring me. Apparently I can't speak all of a sudden, to get up and follow him. Not even thinking twice about it, I pulled myself to my feet and followed him inside. Once inside, he set me down on his couch and slipped a beer into my hands. He sat in a recliner across from me and lit his pipe. We sat there in silence for a little bit while I drank the beer and tried to come to terms with what I'd just seen. Eventually, I looked over at him, questions whirling in my brain. I started with the first thing that came to mind. What the fuck was that thing? He sighed and filled me in as best as he could. There was no name he knew to call it, but he'd killed a few of them over the years in the area. They were known to take over the life of a loved one, and over time they'd eat you alive before moving on. He told me that it happened to him a few years back, and he'd never heard from his actual wife ever again. He thought maybe the thing had killed her, which of course immediately snapped me back to reality. I borrowed his phone to call my wife's mother. I calmed her down long enough to tell her I'd be on the way to the hospital and I'd explain everything when I got there. My neighbor drove me back to the house and even came inside while I grabbed my keys and packed a few things. Before I left, I locked up and thanked my neighbor for his assistance. He promised to tell me more about the creature when I came back. Lynn and I decided to move in with her parents for a while. Jean and I took care of the the move while Lynn's mother took care of her. I never did speak to my neighbor about the creature. I just couldn't handle my any information than I'd already had. To this day, I see my wife in a different way. When I stare into her eyes, all I can see is that creature looking at me in the bathroom. I never told her and her family the truth of what happened to me. I made up lies about a stupid injury and they didn't ask a lot of questions. This morning I went to take a shower and noticed a foul smelling ring in the tub. Her mother made a grand breakfast that morning. I can't shake the feeling that there's something different about her.